faster, healthier, better.
How are you?
I'm good. How are you?
I am good. So today, thank you for being on the podcast. Appreciate you coming on. So the idea of the GetAlpha Mindset Podcast is to interview great people, and I think you're pretty great.
Thank you.
So also the theme of it is to bring in the guest's kind of favorite alcoholic beverage. I know you make bomb cocktails, so why don't you explain to the viewers what this is?
Okay, so I like margaritas. I'm a tequila gal. So I made a margarita, but we made it a little spicy, so I put some jalapenos in it.
I definitely have not ever tried a spicy margarita before, so this is a genuine first reaction to this.
Okay.
So hopefully it tastes okay. Cheers.
Cheers. Oh, yeah.
It's actually really good.
Yeah. The spice hasn't come through yet as much.
No, I taste a little
You
spice.
do? Okay, I know.
I'm going to go for seconds. Here I go. It's actually really, really, really good.
Yeah, this is good. Okay.
Damn.
Okay.
Okay, so you want to explain to the viewers what exactly you do?
Yes, so I am a therapist. I mostly work with couples, which is really my biggest passion.
I'm sure my fiance is listening to this very
yes.
attentively.
Yeah, so that is what I do. I also work with individuals around like relationship distress, anxiety, things like that, like the basic kind of mental health challenges. But my passion is definitely relationship, adult attachment.
Okay.
Yeah.
How'd you get into that? Because I've known you for a bit. And like, how did you jump into that role and wanted to learn that?
Yeah, so when I was in the 10th grade, I was like, I want to be a marriage counselor. Like, this is what I want for my life. I don't know why. Very naive.
I wouldn't say that's naive.
Well, I mean, it is kind of naive because it's hard. Like, it's a lot more, it's intense. Like, let me just,
Fair
it's
enough.
intense work, but I love it. But yeah, so I wanted to be a marriage counselor. My dad's a pastor, and I think just growing up in like that kind of community, seeing people go through challenges, right, with their marriages and stuff like that, I just felt like, wow, this is, people really need support. When things happen in their relationships. And I think that's really what sparked it. And then, I kind of, after my undergrad was like, no, I don't know what I want to do. I don't want to keep going to school. I'm tired of this. But one thing kind of led to another. And I was like, no, I really want to pursue my master's in counseling psychology. And then through that experience, did my internship at a private practice that focused on couples work. So,
That's pretty awesome.
Yeah.
So what is the main thing that you always... There's got to be one that's pretty prominent.
Like issues?
The issues in a relationship.
Yeah, so everyone usually comes in and says, we have communication issues. Okay, I'm going to paint with a wide brush, but say, he's not talking to me. He's not opening up
I don't think that's a wide brush. That's a pretty clear cut thing.
Yeah, but
happens.
it's not always the male if it's a heterosexual couple.
Oh, really?
Not always, no, but majority it is.
Okay.
And I think there's probably just some societal expectations around that that probably influence that. But yeah, so communication is what people usually say. I, as an emotionally focused therapist, kind of have a different perspective on what's happening between couples. So I use their language though, right? Like, okay, let's work on this communication and start new conversations with the two of you. But I would say that's what the clients say. I might have a different perspective of what's going on.
Yeah, you probably you have a different perspective from afar, right? And stuff like that.
Yeah.
So when you talk to them about those kind of situations, do you give them tools at home? Let's again a wide brush. Communication.
Yeah.
Let's say stereotypical. The guy's not he's not communicating with me, but they're both into the relationship. They want to be into it.
Yeah.
But he doesn't know how to communicate.
Yeah.
What tools would you give at home to practice that?
Yeah, so I'm not a behavioral or skills-based therapist. I wouldn't be here, do X, Y, Z. This is going to make your relationship better. And that's because when we think from an adult attachment perspective, right, it's very, very deep. how do I say, we're reacting out of like really intense emotion is what I'll say. And when we're reacting out of intense emotion, our rational brain is not thinking. So, you know, say you're in a fight with your partner, for me to say, okay, you know, take a deep breath, use I statements, like you're not going to remember necessarily to do those things.
What are I statements?
Like, I feel like you are X, Y, Z.
Gotcha.
Which I'm not trying to discredit those things, but I think, yeah, in the height of a moment, it's like fight or flight is totally taking over and your rational brain isn't working. So it's a totally different process in what I do as an EFT therapist that is really, I think, really beautiful because it is all about creating corrective emotional experiences between the couple so that we can create a secure attachment.
Okay.
Yeah.
That seems super, super complicated, but it seems like once you get to the core of it, though, it can be really beautiful to see that pay off, right? Because I'm sure you've seen couples actually grow stronger together from that, right? And you like, what's the longest process have you seen with a client that go through that?
It takes a long time.
Yeah.
And it depends also on, right, if the couple is like highly escalated when I first connect with them, or if they're more, you know, low escalation, they maybe just want to work on some things. They're going to be like those kinds of clients. To create that secure bond happens much quicker because there's not a lot of de-escalation that I need to do with them, right? So it's easier for them to hear what their partner is saying. So essentially, like in the session, so what happens is we do, you know, a session together, and I kind of get a sense of the couple, why they're here. And then I do 2 individual sessions. So one with partner A, one with partner B. And then in that session, it's such like a rich, beautiful session. And I do an attachment history with each partner to kind of understand how they deal with conflict in their life, you know, like how they receive comfort, you know, experiences from past relationships. We talk about their sex life, and then we talk about, just like any traumas that they've experienced. So that really helps me conceptualize like what's going on between them. And then in that 4th session, I kind of bring like a hypothesis to them. And it typically looks the same in most relationships. Yeah. So I don't know if you've heard of, like attachment styles. So someone might be more avoidant, where in conflict they'll, you know, withdraw and not like speak, shut down, go away, try to get out of the situation, maybe try to get out of the relationship. And then, you know, typically the other partner is more anxiously attached. It's like 80% of couples have this pattern. So they are going to be more, you know, like trying to get that partner's attention by any means necessary. So
sometimes that can be aggressive. Sometimes
very aggressive.
Can,
But the thing is that from this perspective that I have with adult attachment is that it's very protective. So say you were avoidant and something happened. There was a fight. You know, you didn't do the dishes. I'm so pissed off. Why didn't you do this? I told you to do it. For you, okay. Like she's talking, whatever, you just leave the room. That would be like that withdrawal. Okay, I'm gonna go from here. Like, I don't want to deal with this. My way to protect myself and the relationship is not to have the conflict.
I would imagine like a lot of times the person would feel that doing that is actually the best because they'd rather withdraw than argue against and cause another big fight. But you're saying in turn that's actually worse.
I'm not saying it's worse than the person that's being aggressive. No, I think it's both not helpful. Just as bad. Yeah, okay. Yeah, it's both not helpful. The person that does more of the withdrawing in the sessions, it can be a little more challenging for them because we're talking, right? So they might not want to share or even be able to access their deeper emotions. At the time, that's where, you know, the work comes in, and eventually they'll be able to, right, if they put that work in and, you know, trust the process of this. But yeah, no, I wouldn't say that is worse than the other. I think it's just a pattern that couples tend to get into that is not helpful in the long run for any relationship. But what I want to make sure people know is that it's okay. Like this is a very adaptive way that you knew how to protect yourself in relationship to other people. So yeah, then that person, right, that might be freaking out about the dishes, for them, they're like, I'm trying to find a resolution because this like we need to fix this or else it's just going to spiral. Right. So for them, they're like coming towards the relationship to save it. The other person is like backing away from the other person to save the relationship. And it just looks different, but they both want the same thing. And I also say, like in the session, someone could be saying this to me, telling me the story and sharing about, I'll kind of, use different interventions with the couple to get to the root of it. So if they're saying, and he never does the dishes and I'm so annoyed and I hate it. I come home and I've had a long day and he doesn't, he's home earlier than me, blah, blah, blah. So what I want to know is we all know this isn't about the dishes. So let's talk about what is under me.
What's going on?
Yeah. So for me, I want to go to that person and say, okay, I get it, right? You come home after a long day and it's so frustrating for you to see those dishes. And I want to know from you, what are you telling yourself in those moments when you walk through the door and see the dishes aren't done? And I imagine the client would say something like, well, he just doesn't care about me. And it's so frustrating because blah, 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 right?
Long list.
Whatever they're going to say.
Long list.
And I'm like, yeah, I get it. You feel like he doesn't care about you. And that must be so hard because, this is your partner, the one that you love the most. And that's so hard to feel this person that's supposed to care about you doesn't care about you. So that's where that anger, is coming from, is actually this place where they just feel like their partner doesn't care. And if their partner doesn't care, what does that mean for the relationship, right? So that's what's going on underneath. And then, so they're telling me this, and I'm, supporting them. Listening, supporting them through it, really validating the experience, right? Because that's also what they really want. They want to be validated.
Well, a lot of times people don't want to talk to, a third party or anything like that because they also don't want to be proven wrong also, right? Sometimes the ego can get in the way of that, right?
Yeah, and that's where EFT is not really like that. I would be validating both parties.
Well, I was going to ask, so in that conversation for that subject, how would you talk to the person, the other person who's wow, this is how I feel?
Of course. So in that scenario, I've distilled it down with the client to, they feel like their partner doesn't care.
Yeah.
And if we go even deeper, that's probably a fear that the relationship won't last. So they're again, with my support, we are coming to that conclusion. And because this is a model of therapy that is experiential, so I want them, so I'm kind of eliciting these emotions. Mind you, some people don't need the eliciting. It's just it's there and they're upset.
Yeah.
And then, so in that moment, I'll say to them, can you turn to your partner and share that with him now? So it's really beautiful. Sometimes it doesn't go this way. So then the partner...
I would imagine so. Is that always a storytelling moment?
I know. But so if they're receptive and there's emotional safety or enough of it in the session for them to turn, look in their partner's eyes and say, I know it seems like I'm really angry when I come home and don't see the dishes done. But underneath that, it's actually just this fear that this relationship won't last because it feels like you don't care about me. Okay, so...
That's deep.
Right.
That went from dishes
to I'm afraid this relationship won't last. But that's where a lot of, from this attachment perspective, a lot of these things that we do that aren't, helpful in the long run, they're very helpful at a time to, maybe withdraw yourself and distance yourself and protect yourself. It might be really helpful for you to be more assertive and more aggressive in your behavior to a partner, but it's not helpful in the long run for the relationship to work, right? So how different is it to hear someone learn and be able to then turn and say, they walk through the door and say to you or whoever, not you, for sure, but you. I understand what you mean. As an example.
I'm on the hot seat right now.
To say, hey, and you might word it I know this isn't the intention, but I'm trying not to get angry right now because I'm having this fear that this relationship is not going to work because my needs aren't getting met and I feel like you don't care about me in this moment when I see the dishes, and then, so in the, that's different. So in the room, right, you asked, what is this other person? What about the other person? After, they have this encounter with each other where I have them turn and talk. I'll then say, like, what was that like to say that to him? She might say, well, I feel like if she's still upset, well, I feel like I've said that before, but like, probably not.
Impersonation of them.
Sorry.
It's okay.
Maybe I should, no.
It's okay.
Yeah, like, you never know, right, how they're going to respond. So it might backfire, but, you know, for the majority of people say, you know, it felt a little awkward at first, but I realized, like, I've never said it like that before, and it felt really good to just be able to understand where that anger is coming from, or however they're going to say it. And then I'll turn to another partner and I'll say, what was that like to hear? You know, to hear her say that she's actually just afraid. That's where that anger is coming from. And they might be totally having their own response over there, like their nervous system, and I'm kind of like keeping an eye on it, but still, I never know.
Do you ever see like a person getting frustrated and more in the sense of like waiting to be like, well, this is how I feel.
Yes, of
Wait,
course.
right?
And I always and often they're like interrupting. So like I'm saying this very eloquently. It doesn't usually go like this.
I was gonna say, oh wow.
Unless, you know, there's more like de-escalation has happened. Like eventually, but also how I work, right? I'm often saying, whoa, like I hear you. This is really hard to hear right now. Thank you for sharing that. I'm gonna stay with partner A over here, and I'm gonna come back to you, and I want to hear what you have to say. Is that okay? Like, is that okay? If
and
I
they're
just
like,
stay
okay.
there? And then they're like, yeah, okay. And then I go, yeah. So then, what was that like to hear? And they might say, you know, it's actually way better for me to hear it like that, because when she gets angry, I just want to shut down and get out of there, and it's so scary, and like I don't want to deal with it. Yeah, so that's kind of how that would happen, and then we'd process it with him. Like, so what was, you know, and he might say, well, I like the reason why I didn't do the dishes is because, and then oh my gosh, okay, I get it, like yeah, and then we would do the exact same thing we did with partner A,
but opposite.
Partner B. Yeah.
Oh wow, yeah. That seems really emotional.
Yeah, it is.
It can probably get pretty heavy for you to listen to all the time, right?
Yeah, it can be for sure. Yeah, it can be, but really
obviously you love it, enjoy it, and it's
I have great
worth
supervision. Like I meet with a supervisor every week, and we talk about this stuff. And if things are coming up for me, right, because I'm a human that's been in relationships, and you know.
So with the kind of teachings that you've learned, and obviously you've saw in relationships and stuff like that, how have you applied that to a relationship, a past relationship? I kind of want to see if you really dived into that with yourself.
Yeah, so I learned this model of therapy, EFT, like 2 months after a really important relationship ended. So it felt a bit frustrating for me. Like, oh my goodness, if I only knew this 6 months ago or 3 months ago even, right? Like, it was actually really hard for me to kind of come to terms with that. And then, it's been a difficult year for me in that regard, just like processing everything that happened. And I can really see this like at play, like the attachment theory stuff. If I look back to the relationship, can definitely see. I won't air anyone's dirty laundry here, but but I'll speak to myself and say, in EFT we call any sort of betrayals attachment injuries. So I had a couple of experiences of an attachment injury happen to me. And as a result, I became incredibly anxiously attached, which is very suffocating for another person to experience. And I just understand it now. I have grace for myself while also having more understanding for him of why that was too difficult, rather than really taking it too personally, which is obviously hard when you're in like a romantic relationship with someone.
Of course.
Obviously it is personal, but I think I just have a better understanding of like what I described, that like withdrawing and what we call pursuing behavior. We call it the cycle. So if you ever have an EFT therapist, they'll often be bringing that into the session. Like, this is your cycle. Like, this is what happens. This is when I have clients come in that want to work on communication, I say, this is your communication pattern, right? Like really using their language. So I can see that cycle completely at play. And I think, it just helps me know that, especially when I have been hurt or betrayed in any way, that I will likely become more anxiously attached to someone, which can look like being more controlling, being, like feeling really abandoned, and then continually seeing that everything they do in that lens, right? And then being like more like aggressive and like it doesn't even need to be like yell. Like I'm not really one to get really angry, but like really sad, just like crying a lot or things like that.
Like a flood of emotion and stuff like that.
Yeah, a flood of emotion. Not to say that anger was never there, but just like probably pretty overwhelming for someone that would naturally maybe go more to withdrawing and kind of shutting down. So yeah.
That's all right. That's all right. Well, so my past relationship before my beloved right now, I was super, super toxic. Like super toxic to the point where we were both, when we argue, we'd both withdraw. And it was one of those things where, personally, it's crazy how when you look back when you're in a relationship, every excuse you can to make it work will make it work. Yeah, but looking back, of course. But when you look back, you're like, that wasn't healthy. This wasn't healthy. Yeah. And at that time, me and my girlfriend at that time, we were both very broken people. But being together made us feel whole. But looking back, it's not it's very toxic, right? Because she counted on me and I counted her, but when we were separated, it was like so much turmoil in our head, and she was going through a lot of stuff in our family, and so was I, but we weren't being supportive of each other. We weren't talking to each other about that kind of stuff. So it's crazy how stuff like that can bleed into other relationships, right? So when I started dating my girlfriend now, my relationship, I promised myself, I'm like, okay, I can't act like that again. But it's hard. It's funny, easier said than done, right? Because when as a habit, when you get into an argument, you withdraw. And that's something I do. Well, not anymore, but that's something I have done before. Like it is protective, and I've full disclosure, I've seen a therapist before and stuff like that, and I didn't even realize that when I was younger I had abandonment issues because my father left me and stuff like that, and no knock on anybody around me, but I never grew up around healthy relationships. So the ones I saw,
even when our parents are together.
Yeah, like my mom and her now husband, I love them, but like that took a while for them to happen, right? So the only healthy relationships I saw were in movies. And that's it. And that's not real. That's not real at all. That's not real at all. So every time I had something great, I didn't understand how to really nurture it and love it. Like there's one thing that somebody told me a long time ago, which I truly think is true, is like a relationship is like a garden, and you need to water it as often as possible and let it grow and tend to it. And I definitely try to do that now as much as possible. And it's funny because my fiance now is she over communicates, but it's okay because I love it, because I want to understand how you feel and I want to reciprocate. And it's interesting because I never felt like that before with my previous girlfriend.
You never felt
like we would nurture each other. We'd be there for each other in sense of like, oh, your life is broken too. That's a little dramatic, but your life is broken too, and mine is also. But when we're together, it's not that bad out there, right? But it became super toxic. So that's definitely, I don't know. That's something it's funny because I tell myself it was good teaching moment for me, and it was good to see that going backwards, but I don't know. It's funny because when you mentioned the withdrawing thing, I'm sure that's stereotypically what men do. That is definitely 100% what I used to do. I do that I'm sure I've done that here and there, but I do that significantly less. Now when we have an argument or anything like that, I take a breath, and then we fully have an honest conversation. I'm like, why are you really upset? Or I'm lucky enough where like my fiance will be like, what's actually going on?
Yes.
And it's a bit annoying.
Good for you, Lauren.
Yeah, it's a bit annoying because it could, like, for example, like I tell her all the time that like my whole life like is like I do the best I can for people, and I love it, and I think it's my gift, and I think it's my calling, 100%. But it can be a little taxing. It can be a little tiring, right? And you say something. You look like you have to say something.
No, I was gonna say a lot of withdrawers say that. They
Oh,
say,
really?
Like, they feel really tired. You know, they've been like trying to make this other person happy, like for so long, or other people, but not getting their needs met. And I'm gonna call you out a little bit.
Do it.
The viewers here to say, like, so when I was making this cocktail,
Okay.
I asked you, do you like salt on
Yeah,
your rim?
yeah.
And Norman said,
Yeah.
what did you say?
I think I
over
said.
there? You said yeah.
I think I said
Yeah,
yes. Yeah.
you said yeah. Go ahead. And then when we were drinking it, he's like, "Yeah, I don't like salt, but
That was off air though. But
I don't like salt, but it actually tastes good." But the thing is, right? Like, even in, you know, you might not be like, you think about a relationship. Okay, the withdrawing attributes, but like even in that, you are abandoning your needs because you didn't want to be rude to me. Yes. Which is essentially what withdrawers do, but in the relationship.
As I just said, I withdraw sometimes, but it's okay.
No. But like, do you know what I'm saying? It's
I
like, if often I find with the withdrawers in the relationship, they have continually not spoken about what they need because they don't want to rock the boat. Maybe they don't even know. A lot of men, I feel, and if we're going to say withdrawers are men, it's not, again, I really want to write home that it's not always the case. I have a number of clients where the woman is actually the withdrawer, but
we're just speaking for this conversation.
For this conversation, it does tend to be the men in a heterosexual relationship. And it's like when they're done with the relationship, that's when, well, I didn't, like, this is what I needed, I'm not going to find it here.
Which is not fair almost.
Yeah, it's not fair. It isn't fair. And it's like the only time that you are, as the woman, getting the vulnerability of your man is when they're one foot out the door, ready to go, saying goodbye. And I get it because, of course, right? Like, if you have been not expressing your, you know, needs, and you have been trying so hard to like reach this measuring stick that every time you reach it gets put up even higher from that more pursuing partner. Like, of course, you're like, I cannot do this forever. The thing I hear the most from withdrawers is, you know, like, there's no winning for me. There's no winning. Like, anything I do, there's no winning. Like, I can't get it right. I'm always criticized. So for them, right, and this is like those more avoidant people, I know there's a book out there called Attached that people really love that I actually don't think is like the greatest book for adult attachment, although like it's like very popular in that.
So why is it popular then?
Because like if you haven't really dove into like adult attachment and like why people do what they do, like every behavior is like for a reason, you know? So this book like really highlights almost avoidant people as like you shouldn't get into relationships with them, like something wrong with it. They just like kind of highlights them in a really negative way. And like, yeah, like stay away from these people almost, but it doesn't leave the room that, you know, like with all the years of research in EFT that shows that these people that are more avoidant or withdrawing, like they like our attachment styles are adaptive, like they can change. And with, you know, it is a lot of work. You know, couples can really like create secure attachments. And so, yeah, that's like, sorry, I just thought about that book because I keep seeing it popping up being like, oh, this is such a great book. And I just want to be like, no, like, yes, I'm sure that you'll learn a lot about certain things, but also there's just a side of the coin that's really missing in that, you know, and I have a soft spot for withdrawers because of my previous relationship where I think like, I don't ever want someone to feel that way again. And mind you, I had plenty of amazing reasons to be upset.
Yeah, okay.
But I do have a soft spot for it because I think what a lonely place it might be to not be able to express yourself or express your needs or feel safe enough to do so. That being said, right, of course, that person that might be more fiery, more like talking a lot and sharing and however you want to say that, they usually have like more abandonment issues and are feeling like pretty, I think, well, they probably both have, you know, to some degree, some abandonment, but just like that's kind of the story that they tell themselves. And, you know, really fighting for the relationship. And like, again, I think I said by like any means necessary. It's like, think about like a toddler, and I don't mean to say this condescendingly, but like think of a toddler who is like wanting attention. They get it any way that they want, like in any way that they can, right? So they might be screaming, they might be like poking, they might be, you know, full on the ground having a tantrum, because they need like that connection, they need that contact, and so that's often what's happening with that other partner. That's the more like pursuing individual.
That's interesting. So there's withdrawing. What other kind of things does a person do? Because I only know withdrawing. What other ways does a person do?
So like that anxious person, they're very critical. So we really see it in those two, either withdrawing or pursuing in EFT. And then in attachment theory too, there's like disorganized. So you might find someone that does a bit of both. You might have a couple that does, you know, like you said, the more withdrawing. That's where we would get really, as a therapist, like very curious about, like, has it always been that way?
I feel like you want to ask me, has it always been that way? It definitely has for me. For me, 100%.
In the relationship.
Oops.
Like, no, it's okay. Like, were you both always withdrawing, or did one of the partners who maybe might have been more pursuing, like, get burnt out? That's what we call it, like a burnt out pursuer. Like they've tried so hard, they were critical, they were.
I know. I would both.
You would say they both. Okay.
Both until now, but
yeah. So I would say, you know, sometimes you do have that where you'll have the two withdrawing partners, and honestly, in those cases, like it's not, if they're not coming to therapy, like if there's just like two people that are more withdrawing out in the world, like it probably works for them. Do you know what I mean? Like,
in a bad way. Yeah.
Well, yeah. I mean, like it just, okay, we don't need to talk about it. They both feel the same. Like we don't need to talk about this. Okay.
But a lot, I would imagine like a lot of resentment can happen.
Yeah, it could. But if they both withdraw, like how, like it might not, you know, for some people, and for some people too, that are more, that like pursuing behavior. If you have two of those people, they're kind of both on the like attack. Yeah, like it might just work for them because they understand each other. They understand why they're doing what they're doing. And, you know, I would say typically like, yeah, like we want to create secure attachments. We want, like, I want people to have secure attachments. That's why I'm doing this work. I think it's like, you know, thinking of like creating like healthy mindsets and a healthy life and all that, you know, what you're exploring on this podcast, you know, in my opinion, like our life is really only as good as our relationships are. Well,
that's one thing also why I wanted to have you on here is because like, you know, I want to dive into betterment. I want to dive into people doing the best they can for themselves, and like physically great, mentally awesome, but in my opinion all that doesn't matter if like you just said, the relationships aren't meeting up to those standards too, right? And I want to give information out in the world where people can, you know, help that and focus on that and stuff like that, because it's all comes together at the end of the day. Like if you gave me everything in the world that I want right now, my goals, but I don't have a good relationship, good friendships, good like an intimate relationship and friends, family and stuff like that, then all that is personally meaningless to me, right? So I want to understand and I want to know how to better all of that. So
for sure. So again, I know I'm speaking a lot about EFT, but this is just like the framework that I'm trained in.
That's
and like how we think that you create secure attachments is ARE. So are you accessible, responsive, and engaged to your partner? So if they're coming to you with a concern, can you stay with them? Right? It's this idea of being a safe place for each other to land when, you know, when things get rocky in life, and especially when things get rocky between partners. So it's this idea that, we are on a team, and the problem is actually this cycle that we can get into. And we're going to blame that instead of each other, because people are usually blaming each other. So we're going to blame this cycle. And, when it comes, we're going to notice it. Okay, I think this is starting to happen, but let's just stay with each other. And obviously that takes a lot of work. For some couples, right, that, they just have a secure attachment naturally. That's amazing. And really.
So give me like an example of a secure attachment if you can.
Yeah, for sure. So say, the partner comes home and sees the dishes, and they,
damn dishes.
Those damn dishes. And, we're going to say it's a she. Say she is very, again, like she's upset, but she does what we kind of talked about at the beginning. She said, like, maybe not to that extent of feeling, oh, you're going to leave me. Maybe she's not saying that, but like, oh, like, okay, like the dishes didn't get done. Maybe being more curious, and then like being able to hear your partner. And again, like what I said, staying accessible to the other person, right? Staying responsive. So you're not shutting down, like you're hearing, right? That other person, maybe they're expressing their concern that the dishes aren't done. That other person is like, okay, yeah, like I get it, right? Like this must be frustrating, and like engaged, like, okay, you know what? I'll go do it now. Like, I'm sorry. Or like, I'll go do it when I'm done this. And, and also just like, there's, just a lightness, right, that comes. But there needs to be that security, that emotional security and safety to know that your partner is going to have your back, right? And there is a lot of research, and like, sorry, I don't have like the references in my head, but like partners that do have those secure attachments. I know there's one research study that's Sue Johnson. So she's the founder of EFT. She created it in, I think, like the 80s. So she is amazing. And so anything by her, people should look into. She has a great book called Hold Me Tight. So it's really like diving into this like cycle and these things, and how you can have these, what she calls like hold me tight, like close conversations with your partner. And then she has a book called Love Sense, which is really great too, all about adult attachment. So I know I brought up the Attached book. I would suggest people to actually read Love Sense instead of that book. But yeah, she did a study on women who were in a relationship that wasn't securely attached, and they put them in a machine and kind of said, like, you're going to get these shocks. And there's going to be like different experiences of, one time a stranger is going to hold your hand, and another time your partner is going to hold your hand. And I think at another time it's just going to be you. And when they weren't in secure relationships, their brain, whatever was triggering off in their brain, it was like the area that shows like, like that physical pain that they were monitoring. It was all very high in this circumstance. Then they did EFT for a certain amount of sessions. I don't know, like 20 sessions, but I could be wrong about that. And same thing, same circumstance. You're going to get a shock. And it was like a decently painful shock. And same scenario, yourself, the stranger, your partner. And, they found the first time it was always high. The second time, when they were actually holding their partner's hand, it was like the perceived pain was a lot lower.
That's interesting.
Yeah, it is interesting.
Why do you think that is?
It's like you have a safe place. Like it's like this idea. There's also a study that people like saw a steep hill. And when they were by themselves, they thought, okay, this is like really steep. Like I'm nervous. Like I don't want to go down it. Like this is too steep. But when they were holding or not maybe holding their hand, but when they were with another person, a safe other person, they actually thought that it was less steep. I know that sounds like maybe kind of silly, but essentially just this idea, when we feel safe in the world, we're going to take more risks, right? We're going to be okay if pain comes our way. We're going to have this safe haven that we can just like fall back on. That's interesting
you say that, because one of the things when I'm like, I don't like to vent too much because to me, venting, for me personally, I don't judge it on anybody, but for me, venting, I don't like to complain. But Lauren, when she's had a rough day and stuff like that, she's like, oh, she lets me know. She's like, oh, I just want to talk to you about something, this and this. But she's like, I just want to talk to you because you're my person. And when I talk to you about it, it feels less troubling or less stressful, right? And like, I was like, oh, wow. Yeah, I'm just here. Wow. Maybe I should do this. But it's like, when you look back at it, it's really beautiful for a person that you trust like that to know that they need to do is just be around you, and they could have the worst problem in the world or whatever, or in their mind it's the worst problem in the world.
Yeah.
And it can be so less of a problem just because you create that safety for them or that comfort that it's going to be okay. Yeah, exactly. So I understand that.
That's beautiful.
Yeah. Oh, thank you.
Yeah, and for you to be that for her, right?
It is. It's so beautiful. Place. Yeah, it's because again, going back to my side, my father was super toxic, like stereotypical.
You told me about him before.
Yeah. He's stereotypical, like horrible person. Like he should have been in a movie as a bad dad. Okay. Like, and I guess I just like every time I do something like not listen to my friends, not listen to my family, not listen to Lauren, or even my clients or anything like that, it always in my head reverts back to, okay, he would like destroy this or he would be disrespectful or whatever. I gotta make sure I'm like in it too much, and that's where it comes into turn for like I get so tired because I'm like, oh, that's too much. But anyway, I digress a little bit, but it's okay. So what other books would you recommend to people?
Yeah, so I said The Love Sense, Hold Me Tight. Honestly, like, sorry, I'm just gonna go on another. I'm not gonna answer that completely. But if people aren't into reading, there's so many podcasts. Like, you could literally just search like Sue Johnson. And look into podcasts that she does. That I know she was on Tim Ferriss's show in the summer.
Cool.
And it was like just a really beautiful, couple. It was like 2 hours of them talking about this much more eloquently than I could ever. But
it's okay.
Because she like created the whole thing. So
okay, fair enough.
Yeah. So and she has like a beautiful British accent. She's like an old, beautiful lady. So, So that's another thing. I'm trying to think other books. I feel like most of the books I read are geared towards therapists.
Well,
do you know what I mean?
Kind of makes sense.
So I should but those two books really are standouts for sure. They're both written by her. But again, EFT is like, she's like the founder, creator. So I really value her work. And I do think it's like a good start for people if they want to read those books. I have to think about that. If there are any other ones that I can think of.
Okay. Yeah. And then how do you feel about like love languages and stuff like that? Do you deal with that a lot?
So I think love languages, I don't have like a strong opinion on it. I think it gives people nice language of, how to, really get what they need or want. I think it's not the work that I do. I don't say like, okay, go do your love language. But a lot of clients do come in and say, we've tried our love languages, it's not working, like we're still upset. But I'm like, of course, you haven't de-escalated that cycle, right? Like you're still in this pattern that's keeping you stuck and keeping you far away from each other. So instead of, this thing that's pulling you away, let's have this conflict like actually bring you together. I obviously like am super biased, like in saying
you're honest about it, but it's okay.
I'm honest about the fact that I really think EFT, it is the gold standard for couples therapy. It has over 30 years of really solid research and follow-up studies on couples to say like this actually works. To create a secure attachment is what you want to do. Because the thing is, conflict, a lot of it is unsolvable in relationships because a lot of it has to do with personality. A lot of it has to do with our upbringings. Like we can't necessarily change those things. So let's, use that knowledge to our advantage and say, well, then let's make the conflict draw us closer together by having.
That's a very like positive way of thinking about it, right? Because like, okay, we're going to use this negative thing that, or not negative, but cycle or whatever you may call it. It is negative. Like, it is negative. Yeah,
to be in
and
that
use
kind of
this
cycle.
to bring it together, bring us together. I should say.
To view conflict as less scary, there has to be more secure attachment happening between the couple. There has to be more emotional safety and security. But once that happens, especially in those sessions, as you learn to talk to each other, as I'm guiding that, like, okay, can you turn to her? And eventionally clients just, okay, I'm not even going to ask you. And they just turn to their partner
they know.
Start saying
it's
what they really,
now,
I think, to have that just awareness, I do share that with my couples. It's like, okay, I wish conflict was, I could give you X, Y, Z, and you're never going to have a conflict again, but it will always, 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 always be present in your relationship because we're working with two people, sometimes more if you're in an open relationship. Like, there's just so many things that you never know what could be, coming your way. So let's just have a mindset that we're on the same team. And when that conflict comes, it's actually going to be an opportunity for us to get closer.
Yeah, I think that's a good way of thinking about things.
Easier said than done.
Hey, well, of course. Yeah. That's not bad. So have you ever seen a situation where they've kind of realized that they don't want to be
married or in a relationship?
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah, let's dive into that a little bit.
Yeah. So another thing that I think, like me naturally, like I want to see people's love flourish.
For sure.
That's like, I think, okay, this is something worth like fighting for. Let's really, like, people just don't have the tools. So let's dive into this and see if it'll work. But, I have had a client who came on and said, we're getting a divorce. And, okay, great. So do you want to continue the therapy? Because if you're,
midway through the therapy,
it was more at the beginning, but it depends on the client. I've had it, we're like 30 sessions in and this isn't going to work. And sometimes it's just that. And I want people, whether they stay together or not, like that's part of it, right? Like, unfortunately, relationships end.
Yeah.
And maybe fortunately they end for some people, right? Fortunately, that's a good thing, perhaps. And I think, when that happens, if you have children, you're always going to be in that person's life. So you can continue the therapy.
Yeah.
And it'll probably actually be really beneficial. If you're co-parenting, like one of the biggest things I would say is keep doing it because you're still in that pattern and now you're not even going to be in the same space. So I feel like that, anything over messaging, it's just like amplified in my opinion.
Well, anything can be misconstrued too.
Exactly.
If you don't send an exclamation mark or you're like, is this person mad at me?
Yeah, and it's just like, and you can just be more aggressive because the person's not in front of you.
Yeah,
you
of course.
Say things that you probably shouldn't be saying, that you probably would never say if they really were. It's hard to hate someone up close. So it's easy when you're just, getting your frustrations out over text. And so, anyways, in that case, I think EFT can be really beneficial for that kind of relationship where it's shifting from like a marriage to a co-parenting situation. And then, sometimes it doesn't work out for people, right? It's like, it is what it is. And, typically one person is pretty devastated about that.
Yeah, I would imagine both of them are like,
we've looked at
this is good.
Yeah, and I haven't encountered that yet. Maybe I will one day where, they both just feel really good about their decision to end the relationship.
That's a very mature, both of them are like, we're not doing this, it's okay.
Yeah.
Right?
Which,
I would imagine it's pretty immature.
Yeah.
I wish.
I'm also just thinking of that other person. Yes, but I'm in that. I'm just saying, if someone doesn't respond that way, I don't want them to feel like it's not mature. They love this person.
Yes, sorry.
The most important thing in their life is like being ripped away from them. So, I get it, right? If someone's not going to respond in a way that's like, okay, yes, correct. Let's have a divorce.
Oh wow, so proper.
Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, that's a little bit straightforward, a little different.
Yeah.
That's all right. What kind of difficulties do you see when you start talking to those people in the sense of like, there has to be always the one person who just doesn't want to budge, right?
Yeah.
And how do you push through with that? If there's one person who's like, I just did this, or they just do that. How do you try to break down that wall with them to get more emotional with their partner?
So I think a lot of validation. So there's a reason why they're doing that. Again, like I said, every behavior has a reason. Like people are doing things for a reason. It's always a good reason for them. It doesn't mean it's helpful to the relationship, but it's always a good reason. It's usually protective in nature. It's usually drawing on childhood experiences too, or past relationships, or really significant things that have happened in their own relationship currently. So if they don't want to budge and they don't want to share emotionally, we do what we call in EFT, we like slice that thinner. So I would say, okay.
Slice that thinner?
Slice it thinner.
Okay.
So I would say, okay, like you don't want to turn to him and you don't want to share what you shared with me. Say that's the scenario. Then I would say, like, tell me about that. Like what's going on for you that you can't share with them? they would talk about it. I'm like, can you share that part?
Mm-hmm.
No. Okay. Well, they're here with you now. They're hearing it.
Mm-hmm.
And so, if they really don't want to budge, like that's just more information for me as the client or as the therapist if the client's doing that. And then for the client, I can just kind of like, it's very present process EFT. So I'm like being very transparent in the session of, like, I get it. For you to turn to him would be really scary. I can see it. You're sitting like this. You don't want
closed
to.
off.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And I would, again, that validation of like, I get it. It's too much of a risk to be open and vulnerable with them. Mm-hmm. Right. If you had these experiences where you've tried to be vulnerable in the past, but, they didn't respond in that ARE, the accessible, responsive, and engaged way, that's a signal to you, okay, maybe I shouldn't do this anymore, especially if it's happened so many times. There is research. This is it's not the type of therapy, I do have training in it, but it's not necessarily the type of training or the therapy that I do. It's called John Gottman. So John Gottman, he did research that essentially shows that to have like one negative thing in a relationship, we need 5 positive ones to like neutralize it. So,
I like that.
And that's not a common experience, I don't think, right? So
no.
So it's kind of, if you think of this person that's just like sitting there and not budging, there's reason, right? Like there's reason for them not to trust it. And there's also reason for that other person to do what they were doing. So it's really just like helping, and supporting these clients, like untangling this, really distilling it down to what's going on with them, and then passing it along to each other so that they can create these corrective emotional experiences. So that they can, live more of a secure life together. And then those, 5-to-1 ratio kind of things can really be just more of a natural experience in their relationship. Yeah.
So not to oversimplify it, but like what is the most common mistake that you see that people could just do at home? I know when you meet a couple, like if I give you an example, you would have to meet with them, talk with them, and really understand them. But what is like listeners at home, if they wanna listen, understand their husband or understand their wife or significant other a little bit better, what is like the simplest little thing that you could do?
I would say start seeing each other as on the same team. And that's really hard when there can be resentment and pain and hurt. But you're on the same team, right? This is your partner. That means like you're on the same team, right? If you think about like in sports, if you have a partner, like you're
on the same team.
You're together. You want each other to win. So to start thinking of you and your partner as on the same team, and the way that you fight, your communication, your conflict pattern, however you want to call it, your dance, your cycle, there's so many words, that your negative pattern that we use in EFT, I would say, that is the problem. And to also just like be really just self-aware in those moments when you're feeling upset, like why, like ask yourself the why. And this is why I love EFT, is because it's a lot deeper than more like cognitive and skills-based type therapy, because it's getting more to the root of it. If you can ask yourself like, why, when I see these dishes, am I triggered? And can I pass that part along to my partner? And if your partner's not going to respond to that too, that's information for you, right? If like time and time again, and you can look at yourself and say, I have not, withdrawn and pulled away from the relationship, or I have not aggressively like pursued it by being critical of them and tearing them down and XYZ, whatever you could be doing. But you're really coming to them with those softer, deeper emotions and saying, hey, like this is what's coming up for me when I see those dishes, and doing it in like we say like low and slow. That's going to really calm the nervous system of the other person that you're talking to. Then if they're not going to respond to that, that's information for you. And then you have to ask yourself, do I want to be in a relationship where, I'm really coming vulnerably and they are disregarding me time and time again? So I would definitely say, see you and your partner as on the same team.
That's the start.
Yeah.
Okay. I like that. See your partner as a team.
Yes.
Well, I don't want to take up too much of your time. I appreciate you coming in. Thank you for the amazing drinks. I love the salt.
Oh my gosh.
I love the salt.
No, you don't have to love the
No,
salt.
actually, you know what? I didn't before.
In this context, it was fine.
It was actually delicious.
Okay.
I hope to have you on again.
Oh my gosh, I would love that.
We can talk about some more
things
stuff.
to
And
say.
next time, I promise you can grill me a little bit better.
Oh my gosh.
I feel like-
and I'm saying it. I want Lauren to be here.
Okay, next time. Where can people look you up? Social media?
Yeah.
What clinic you work at?
Yeah, so I don't have any Instagram for my practice. It's just my own boundary right now.
Mm-hmm.
I do have a Facebook page, Noun Therapy, and then I have you could go on my website, nountherapy.com, or email me
Nountherapy.com.
at Amanda@nountherapy.com.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Well, thank you for coming in.
Of course. Cheers.
Cheers. Honestly, this was amazing.
Yeah,
This was
right?
amazing.
It's so good.
I love
I'm proud of myself with this one.